Rachel Reeves has pulled the plug on her manifesto-breaking income tax raid. Or has she? See, Downing Street is now refusing to rule out the increase. Despite the media being briefed this morning, the Chancellor was doing exactly that. Uncertainty, they say, breeds chaos. The markets have been spooked. The FTSE has faced its worst day since April. Borrowing costs have surged and the pound has tumbled to a 2-year low. Investors can't see how Reeves can reliably and sustainably fill her budget black hole. Here to make sense of this and what comes next is money expert Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Thanks for joining me, Justin.
My pleasure.
I just want to focus a bit on the communication strategy here because there are inevitable pressures on the Chancellor. She does need the cash, but many take issue with how she's going around it. Companies have been scrambling to shore themselves up before the budget, reacting to every twist, every turn. Unemployment's up. Do you think people could have lost jobs due to this constant flip-flopping from the Chancellor?
This has been very dangerous indeed. Rank amateurism right the way through. And you're quite right to suggest that people could have lost jobs, or more to the point, actually, less jobs actually being created. Why? Because, as you're implying, actually, it's confidence. That's the crucial word for this in any economy. And what we've seen from this government, and especially from this Chancellor, is actually no clear message which we can hang on and say, right, now we know where we're going. Whether you agree with it or not, we can see some stability. We're not seeing any of that at all. And then link that to the fact that before a budget, we used to have that old-fashioned thing known as purdah, when you actually were supposed to be in silence. And if you broke the rules, sometimes you could even end up going to chokey for doing so. But now we've seen the murder of purdah, and we're seeing now this ridiculous selection of policies being floated out like kites over the past few weeks. And even an even more ridiculous press conference where we were all scratching our heads saying, well, what was the purpose of that then? Except to actually underline the fact she might be putting up income tax. And therefore, a few days later then saying, well, we're not going to do income tax, we think. This is no way to run a government. And it's costing us money. We've already seen the cost of the interest rates of the 10-year gilt go up. That means the cost of our debt goes up. Remember, our debt is, in terms of interest costs, over £100 billion a year. That's an awful lot for, just for your credit card debt. And remember, only you go back 6 years, that was around about 50 billion. So an extra cost like that. So stupid words, amateur communication and management has cost us money and has probably cost us jobs.
It's hard to understand the rationale here because when she announced these tax rises, politically, people were she laid the ground to announce the income tax rise. Politically, it was, crazy. But on the markets, they seemed quite subdued. I think they actually gained a little bit of confidence that, okay, we've got a sustainable way for Britain to pay its debt. She has borrowed more than any this year, more than any year that we have since the pandemic, though we don't have any crisis to blame that borrowing on. So we're very reliant on these interest rates. But what she's done here, she's thought the OBR have said that her economic forecasts are better than expected. So by reversing the income tax rate, she's reduced her wiggle room at the same time as then spooking the markets, raising the interest rates, which make it more inevitable that maybe she's going to need to go back to the country and raise the taxes again.
Yes, for markets, so just a few weeks ago, we were sitting there saying we may not like the idea of income tax going up. And politically, of course, you've highlighted the fact it's probably crazy in terms of their political reliability. But if you said, as John Maynard Keynes once said, if the facts change, I change my mind. Do you? And the facts have materially changed. So she would have every reason to say, actually, it's changed, so I'm going to change my mind over the manifesto promise because it's completely different. Now, the markets are sort of getting used to the idea of the fact that income tax would have to go up and actually see some other areas costing a bit more because it looked as though there was a stable policy. We can see this being managed through. Okay, may not like it all, but we can do it. What markets really hate is when you actually not so much test out different ideas, but start flip-flopping and actually doing a sort of, hokey-cokey. You have put some in, put some out as to where this policy is going. What it does mean, you don't trust what they're saying. And if you don't trust people and you don't trust the policies, guess what? You don't invest. You're not going to support that. And that means less overseas investors will wish to support the United Kingdom until such time as they can have confidence. Actually, we have a serious policy which is seen to be working. Well, at the moment, we don't have a policy. So whether it works or not is a completely different issue.
Do you think some of this flip-flopping is down to how much the Chancellor seems to be relying on the OBR? It seems that she wants to operate within these very tight margins, which then means that, as you say, she's flip-flopping. What have chancellors done in years gone by? Why does it seem to be that we've always had quite stable economic and monetary policy for, between budgets, and why this change is happening now under this Labour government?
Well, a particular issue here is that if you look back at other chancellors, is when they come up with statements, they give themselves enough space and excuse to be able to change and adjust. What Rachel from Accounts, I'm afraid, has been doing is actually saying, I've got my ironclad rules that I'm going to have. Well, those iron rules are looking a bit rusty now. And so if you say I'm not going to be attacking the main taxes, and particularly when you talk about national insurance, which of course she did put up national insurance, so she's already broken it to that extent. But what you had was actually tying herself down to these rules, which gave her very, very little wriggle room. And then especially if the figures coming from the OBR weren't as she thought they were going to be, therefore made it even more difficult. Now, maybe she's been rescued a little bit this time because the OBR have been carrying out another search of this magic sofa and say, look what we found here. As well as some old pound coins, we've got a safety pin, and maybe it's something else we can actually fill up the black hole with. We'll have to wait and see. But it's looking like an excuse. It's not looking like clear, solid policy backed up with financial logic. It sounds like, frankly, rank amateur politics, sort of you see at university, backed up by very little financial knowledge and experience. And that's one of the key issues. When you look at the Treasury, when you look at the OBR, who probably do have much more experience, but certainly when you look at the ministers themselves and the people in the cabinet, no business experience whatsoever, very little, and of course very little economic understanding either.
Well, that's what I was going to say to you. So the Chancellor, when she came and did this very strange press conference where she kind of buttered us up for the income tax rises, but said, wait a month and you'll find out. She made the point when journalists questioned her that markets trust her. But all we've seen since she came into office is a gradual uptick in Britain's borrowing costs and periodic market chaos. As a city man, or former city man, how do markets see Chancellor Rachel Reeves, but not? Sometimes I think she makes the point that they trust her compared to other people in Labour. Do they trust her compared to other people in other parties, is I think what I'm getting at.
Well, basically what you've seen is, of course, the markets hadn't, up until only 2 years ago, didn't know much about her anyway. So what's the trust at that stage? But give her the benefit of the doubt. Let's see what the budget says. But ever since they had the first budget, Markets have just looked and said, I don't understand what's going on here. And if I don't understand, and I don't have confidence, then I'm not going to participate in this. And I will just back off. We're already seeing this now with FDI, which is foreign direct investment, which has come off very dramatically indeed. That's overseas people looking at the United Kingdom saying, that's a good place to invest. And we were really good at attracting overseas investment, certainly by far one of the best in Europe. But we saw some very dramatic fall off. This will only underline this further. And people will say, well, okay, I'm going to invest, but I probably won't be investing in Britain at the moment because I don't trust their Chancellor in terms of having policies which are sustainable and there can be a level of consistency over time. If you're going to flip-flop like that, well, you're not going to do that with my company, my money, and our jobs for our business.
She still has, the OBR saying, a £20 billion black hole, so she's going to need to find the cash. Where do you think she might look to raise that?
Well, this is really going to be a very difficult bit because you say the black hole is still there. We don't know precisely what it is, but it's still going to be very significant. Let's say 20 billion or so. It's only very difficult to cover it. The great thing about income tax, not many great things about income tax, but it's simple and it's straightforward. People understand it. And of course, it raises a lot of money. If you don't want to go down the route of those three major taxes, remember, we've only got three major taxes, which are VAT, national insurance, and income tax. Even corporation tax is relatively small in comparison to them. Therefore, what are you going to do? Well, that's where you do some serious searching on the back of the sofa. Is it the sin taxes, like sort of going on taxing in terms of gambling and areas like that, we've been talked about? Other areas in terms of wealth, in terms of people's houses and things like that. The wealth tax is always a good one to fall back on. But the big line to remember with wealth taxes, the wealth taxes don't actually earn any money. You don't get wealthy through wealth tax. Actually, what you do is create wealth and you get the ability to raise more tax. That's the way. And she's got it the wrong way round at the moment. And now she's got the political hounds after her as well. So I can quite understand why they're in possibly, is it panic mode? Well, I suspect we're going to hear a lot more contrition over the next few days as people say, no, we didn't really mean that. We're going to try and be consistent. Well, I'm afraid they've already lost that trust. It's very, very hard to win that. It's very easy to lose it. And she has.
I think when it was thought that she might be raising income tax, I think in Westminster, there was a lot of chaos over the idea that they've betrayed a manifesto promise. But I think if you actually look behind the rationale, it was kind of understandable. We were going to raise income tax, but we were going to cut national insurance so that it was only pensioners that ended up paying more. And they were only paying more by virtue of the fact that they were having such a big pay rise due to the triple lock. Now she's got to look through other ways to raise this cash. A lot of economists are worrying about the fact that with her tinkering at all of these edges, she's not thinking about the multiplier effect, how she's affecting the economy. With her potentially freezing income tax thresholds, they're talking about potentially 10 million people paying the higher rate. What does that do to our economy? What does that?
Yes, you've got this thing called fiscal drag, which of course gives them extra money without necessarily putting the rates up. It's a lovely sort of hidden way of going about it, and all politicians have done it. It's inevitable, but of course it is actually a fault now, just increasing income tax. So what was so stupid with this was you actually look back and say, well, they've already breached some of their mandates because they did with employer national insurance. But to actually realise that things have changed so substantially, it needs some clear, solid action, which is understandable. If you don't go through the simple mechanisms, that means you're going to go through more smaller, complicated areas, which people won't really fully understand. It'll be really one of the consequences of it. They don't have trust in it. What she could have done is actually say, well, now let's focus on where the growth areas are by be able to release some areas, such as, for example, as we've seen with the Tories talking about stamp duty, changing stamp duty, because there's a great multiplier there, because it would encourage people to move house, property, whatever, and every time you do that, you then redecorate, you rebuild, you have more people earning money. If they're earning money, they're paying more tax. That gets the economy going again. Those sort of things are easy. The other element is also doing investment by way of guarantee, i.e. not using any government money, but using things like enterprise investment schemes, smaller enterprise investment schemes, to actually get one of the great nurtures we're good at in this country, setting up small businesses. And remember, the small businesses are the largest employer in this country. That's what you want to try and do. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of businesses. Okay, an awful lot won't get through. But with tax incentives, it's a better way of the government to actually try and do that. It doesn't cost them anything until those companies start going bust. But even so, that's still a cheaper way of doing it than try and provide direct subsidies. So there are positive things she could do here, and all of which she's done over the past 2 weeks is just focus on their inability to come up with clear, solid policies. One of the reasons you had Purda was to make sure you didn't have this sort of issue. So you've got actually people saying, well, we're not sure what's going to be in the budget. Yes, some kites have been flown before, but what you're not doing is opening yourself up as a politician to being unreliable. And that's exactly what she's now done, and she's paying the price. Watch that 10-year gilt. We've seen significant moves in the cost of that, and that means directly the government having to pay more for our debt.
It does seem like they're trying everything they can to raise cash to just keep the economy and the structure of our government exactly as it is, even though we know that it's not sustainable. Thank you so much for joining me, Justin.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.